Right, welcome to this week's episode of the Leadership Lane podcast. My name is Rita Chincotta, and I'm so pleased to be joined today by Nick Maxwell. Nick Maxwell, for those of you that do not know, is the epitome of hard work and persistence and really team. So he has had an illustrious career at the Collingwood Football Club. For those of you that are not Melbourne based, that is a Australian rules football club here in Melbourne, Australia. But he's now gone on to more of a corporate leadership role. So I thought it'd be great to bring Nick on today just to talk to us about, the similarities with sporting and corporate environments, but particularly around leadership and how you've really developed in your leadership lanes, Nick. So a little bit more just on Nick before we jump into the questions. Nick was the captain of the Collingwood Football Club, I'll get my words right, between 2008 and 2014. And there was a drought-breaking premiership during your captaincy, Nick, in 2010, which I'm sure you will talk to us more about. You're recognised by colleagues and peers for your excellent leadership capabilities. And you then went on, post-Collingwood to become a successful leadership coach with the Melbourne Storm, GWS Giants, and also an advisor to leaders in business, presenting to and working with companies, big companies here in Australia like Telstra, Barry Plant Real Estate, PwC, BHP, Holden, and also the Melbourne Stars. You've completed your formal studies in MBA. You've focused on sports administration, and you've not moved too far from football. I know you're still very, very much associated with the club, including the AFL, AFLW, Netball, and other administrative leadership kind of opportunities. And now you are managing a beautiful space that we have the privilege of working in, not too far from us, CEO of Eclat. Nick Maxwell, a very, very big welcome to you.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to a chat.
Yeah, me too. It's so good to have you on. And well, I've got to confess, we are a Collingwood house. That was part of the marriage contract when I signed up. So it kind of came as part of it. So there are a few very happy faces in my house and also in my team that are really looking forward to this conversation, as I'm sure so many are. You've had a brilliant, brilliant career. And today I wanted to delve into, from your perspective, how have you gone about developing your leadership style and your leadership behaviours and attributes, whilst you've also been learning leadership on the go. Obviously, you became captain of the team of the Collingwood Magpies team whilst you were a peer, and then you jumped up into that captaincy role. So I often say to leaders, we can't really chuck a learner plate on our back and say, well, sorry, I'm learning. I'm learning to be a leader and I'm still doing. It's often something that we've got to do at the same time. How did you find that, Nick, when you were asked to step up into that captain role?
Yeah, it was very interesting. I mean, for me, I've captained one team in my life in sport, and having had playing sports since the age of about 6, and one team, sort of a lot of time the leader is someone they've got that leadership capacity and they bring it all the way through their careers. But for me, Collingwood was the only one that I ever captained, so I did certainly learn on the job, and I guess that has its advantages and disadvantages in that I was who I was, and I was selected to go into that role. And that was probably an early leadership lesson for me, was that I remember sitting down with my coach about 5 weeks into the season, and I hadn't started the season too well in my first year as captain. And he just said, you don't have to be anything that you're not. We picked you for this role because of who you are, not because of who we want you to be. So for me, that was a real vote of confidence because I guess from my capacity as an actual player, I wasn't one of the superstar players. I was someone who was still improving and trying to learn and get better as a player. So to have the leadership element added to that while I hadn't reached the peak of playing and my ability as a player was sort of a separate challenge. So I guess the leadership element actually came a lot more naturally to me rather than the performing element. So it was interesting. I guess I probably went the other way around it, whereas most people are more established as players and they're in that higher echelon in their ability as a player. And then from there, the leadership's sort of the bit that they grow into. So it was a little bit different for me, but I guess the strengths that I had was that I certainly didn't think I knew it all because I hadn't done it before. So I was very inclusive, asked a lot of questions, had a lot of senior players in my team that were a lot older than me in life and in football experience. So trying to lean on them and get their experiences and their understanding and pick their brains was something I certainly did a lot of. And even little things like going into a leadership meeting, I tried to be the last one to give an opinion. So we'd go around the table on certain subjects and hear from everyone else, just because I didn't want to influence their decision. I wanted to get exactly what they were thinking, not that group think, which can often happen. So particularly if the leader starts first. So that's sort of a little thing that I tried to do as I went around. And it also gives you a way of getting everyone's opinion and understanding, because someone can certainly, a lot of the time, they've got a better or different perspective to what you have, because everyone comes from different backgrounds and has different understanding of certain elements of the day-to-day. So that was certainly something I tried to do.
Yeah. So what stands out there is you mentioned your inclusive nature, but also your ability to ask questions. And what comes out as you talk about that is your humility. Do you think that was one of the key reasons why they picked you at the time? Notwithstanding you've said you were developing, as a player. So developing still, I guess, with, in your particular craft, which is sport, but they obviously saw something in you from a leadership perspective. Did your leaders at the time articulate what they saw in you?
Yeah, they did. So even early in my career, the captain and vice captain, Nathan Buckley and James Clement, approached me early in my career and said, we want you to nominate for the leadership group, which was the standard process. And I said, well, why would you want me to? I'm barely in the team. I haven't established myself. And they actually explained to me what leadership was. And they said, well, you show up early, you work your backside off, you're very disciplined in the way that you approach everything. We're never going to have any issues with you getting in trouble at nightclubs or any of that sort of stuff. And they just kept on going on about all these things. Like I do a lot of get people together and organise our functions and help bring in kids when there was a sick kid. And so try and do all those little things that to me were just natural. I wasn't trying to do anything that I wouldn't do if I was the 45th player on the list. And when they pointed that out to me, that they were leadership attributes, that sort of made me go, oh, okay, if that's what we're looking for. And I guess that's sort of something I've always kept with me. So even today now in the work that I've got now, it's very, very different to a sporting organisation. But if you see some form of attribute or something that someone does that you really like, you point it out and encourage them and say, well done. And I loved how you did that. And because everyone loves getting positive feedback. So if you want to see a behaviour repeated regularly and it become part of your culture and what you do day to day, then you need to continually give that feedback and make people feel good about themselves and understand it. And also vice versa. Sometimes just the little things that with the more experience you've got in life or in business or whatever it is, you pick up on little things that others don't pick up on. So just pointing out those little moments and little ways that they can do things just to add a couple of % here or there, that's also part of that experience. Yeah,
so true. And I think it's what you described there, it sounds to me like there was a real consistency that they saw in you around, that showing up, that discipline, that hard work, the risk of scandals perhaps reduced, notwithstanding that you're a young footballer at the time. That reward and recognition piece, super important. And I think what I'm hearing in that is that as the leader, it's really often we're trained to spot what's the problem with this, like where has it gone wrong, what's the issue. So to spot and solve the problems and complexities. But what I'm hearing in that is that you're really focusing on, so what's going well, and actually spotting that. No doubt you're still looking for, mishaps every now and again that might occur, but how big a part of that is it in terms of your leadership, your organisation that you're now leading around rewarding and valuing your team's contribution?
Yeah, I think we probably now we try and do it amongst our team a lot and try and point out all the good things that they're doing. Obviously, there's always areas we're trying to improve in and trying to get better at, but I think probably, particularly in this day and age, the way that people have changed, if you go back sort of 20 or 25 years in any industry, it was more you showed up, did your job, and you didn't need recognition or a pat on the back for doing your job. It was just expected. Whereas now, and you'd get told off if you didn't, but you go the other way now, it's sort of more everyone expects that instant recognition. And it sort of comes back a lot to the world we live in, where I speak to leaders and I go, who in the room said this damn generation, they want everything handed to them on a platter, and they want to be promoted before they're ready, and they want bonuses. And the way I describe it to them is, well, that's the world they live in. That's everything's instant recognition. Like, we watch the news on 7, 9 or 10 at 6 o'clock every night, and you have to wait till then to get it, and they get it on Twitter a minute after it happened, or X, whatever it's called now. We had to learn to read the Melways, which is the map book when you were driving anywhere, and work out where you're going. Now they just hit one button and Google takes them where they need to go. So everything's now, even we used to play the pinball machine at the fish and chip shop. You put your $2 in, and when those 5 balls are gone, it's all over. Whereas now I watch them, they don't even get to the end of a game when they're playing FIFA before they hit reset to start again. So they haven't even got the real resilience to push through that, and go to Blockbuster Video or Video Easy, and the pain of showing up and all those overnights are out. They have that little tag in the top, and you had to wait till the next day to come back and hope that you could watch that movie. Whereas now you can download literally any show at any time in the space of 30 seconds. So everything's now, except your business, your degree or your apprenticeship, and relationships you build both at work and outside of that, they still all take the same amount of time today as what they did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. So the smartest person 50 years ago still did it at the same time as the smartest person today. So I think that it's a challenging situation for the sort of 20 to 35-ish, that age group coming through, because they've grown up with the social media and the instant recognition of likes and comments and all that type of thing. So we've actually got to learn to guide them and support them on the journey that they're having, both as people and as colleagues, or when we're leading them in work, as opposed to get frustrated with them. And I think a lot of that comes back to the journey that they're on in their work sense in particular, is being able to talk about your own journey and what journey you were on. And when I talk to young players when I was still playing and say, well, I played 2.5 years of VFL football before I played my first AFL game, and they're coming in because they're not picked in round 1, and all of a sudden they think the world's going to end. When you actually explain that and go through it to them, that it's part of that journey and learning and finding out how much it means to you, whether you're willing to work harder than what you have up until that point in time to get better. And if you are, then you'll get rewarded eventually. So I think sharing those experiences, and because the journey they're on is the person who is leading them. That's their journey, whether in any workforce, they want your job eventually, or they want something in that sort of senior role, and that's their ultimate goal. So how do you help guide them on that and share your experiences with them?
It's such a good point around that guidance and support. I know, gosh, you've pointed it out, and that was, there were 3 or 4 television channels, certainly when I was growing up. And now my mind, even though I know I have all these television channels available to me, I still kind of think of those 4. The kids get really annoyed when they see an ad and they go, what's that? Like, why is that interrupting my show? Things have changed. And now I think leaders have a tricky job, because we are managing a multi-generational workforce. And so you've pointed out there that you've got your younger ones coming through that maybe they are a little bit more impatient, maybe not. Maybe it is, they've grown up with an iPad in their hand a lot of the time. And so they have the dopamine hit from the very quick recognition of whatever it is that they're posting. So for leaders, and for you, Nick, how have you found, how difficult or how easy has it been for you to really provide that guidance and support? Because as you were talking, I thought that's traditionally the role that, as parents or community leaders, that's the role that we play in our children's lives. But I am hearing, and just from what you've said, a lot of leaders are now finding themselves in the position where they've got to provide this guidance and support and be connecting with their people in a much deeper way than maybe, what we would have had 20, 30 years ago when we were joining the workforce. What's your view on that? Do you think there is a bigger role that we play now as leaders in guiding and supporting our people?
Yeah, there certainly is. And that's the extra challenge that comes with the post-COVID world, where we have this flexible working, and there's not many locations or many businesses anymore that work 5 days from work or from the office. And unfortunately, the biggest challenge is that in not being in the office, we become really transactional. So we jump on a Zoom meeting, the Zoom meeting starts, we go through the things we have to go through, and then we jump off. You watch, I'll jump on and work with leaders and give them feedback on different ways that they do Zoom meetings. and everyone's video's off, and the leader goes, "Righto, video's on, let's go," and they start. So as I mean, it's transactional. That'd be like in real life, walking into a meeting, everyone's sitting around the meeting table and just standing there with your hands across your face, waiting you'd never do it. Like you actually go, "Oh, your footy team lost on the weekend," or "How did your daughter's ballet concert go?" And "Oh, I heard it was someone's birthday." And you actually, all those little moments are little pieces of connection and building connection amongst whoever is in that room. So it's a real challenge for everyone to work out how we do it, and then trying to get people back in the office, because some industries can work from home, and some people have the capacity to be able to work and compartmentalize whatever they need to do in a certain period of time and be really disciplined around that. But the more and more people I speak to say that they're really struggling with from home, with the connection and the element of the humanity and being around people, and being disconnected from them, which comes back to that transactional nature of Zooms and Microsoft Teams and all that. And then the second part to that is that they feel like they get dragged into other things, or they're distracted a lot more working from home, because you can go and take the dog for a walk. And sometimes that's good. As I said, some people are very good at having that discipline. So I guess that comes a little bit back to Eclat, and what we're trying to do is, because we're small to medium business, sort of 1 desk to 8 desks in an office. And what we're trying to do is, every employee who's with us, we're trying to help the employer solve issues. So we've got our own gym on site. So straight away, every single employee will save $2,000 or whatever they're paying for their gym membership, because they get one at work. Being able to offer something that feels more like a hotel than an office space. All the little extras that go with it, being able to order food or coffee to your desk, or to certain areas that you're based in within where we are. And probably the biggest one for us is our Eclat sessions, where we run about 46 events a year for free for our members, where we put on food and drink and some form of entertainment. Because a small to medium business, for an employer who's running that, they don't want to spend time having to go, "Oh, well, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? How are we going to resource that?" They need to focus on their business. They want to run their business, particularly in the way the world's going at the moment, how tough things are for so many SMEs out there. We offer those. So we had Harry Moffat, who's a 30-year Australian Defence Force and SAS veteran, because it was going to Remembrance Day last week, and his stories and leadership and his experiences, it was just phenomenal to hear from someone like that. And I know everyone in the room was just blown away. So we sort of try and balance it between those type of experiences where you're learning from a Billy Slater and a criminal psychologist, and leadership talks and sports stars and all that. And then you've also got the social element, which is a wine tasting and gin tasting and oyster farmer, and all these different ways that we can help bring people together. So I think that from that perspective, it's around trying to support that employer and take a lot of the painful elements of business off their plate and help support them through that.
Yeah, look, I can speak from experience, having been in that space and having been exposed to the events, that I think for a leader, that kind of pressure in terms of having that taken off and having somebody else help you connect with people, because that's effectively, from a user perspective, that's how I see it. You're strengthening that ability for leaders to be able to connect not only with their teams, but also with their clients through a really, really beautiful space. Which I think is, it certainly helps take that pressure off leaders' plates without a doubt. And if we'll put the Eclat website obviously in the show notes, but if you are Melbourne based, it's worth checking out the venue because it is spectacular. And having run an event there myself only recently, I can't speak highly enough, Nick, of you and the team. So thank you.
Thank you. It's certainly the team. They're the ones that and that's where I'm very lucky in that I've had some people who are in our team, and there's 3 founders, but the team we've been able to build is one we're really proud of, and they believe in the brand and what we're trying to do, and they're real people orientated sort of service type people, and that's what you need to be, I think, to be successful in this day and age. With this, we can't be transactional, and that's something we're very proud of, is that I know I can send Dom, our events manager, to you, and I know that she'll make sure that your experience is sensational. So as I said, it comes back to the people, and again, going back to the employer, if you've got the right people, you obviously don't want to lose them either. So being able to offer a lot of different things are going to help them retain people and help support their staff is obviously crucial.
Which it is. We know how expensive it is to hire people. So absolutely. I think all leaders that are listening are going to have an interest in that. Nick, as you shaped your leadership development career, and it's been lovely to already get a snippet of, obviously Nick Maxwell is a sports star, captain of the Collingwood Football Club, now coming into corporate leadership. Who have you had in your corner? And you don't need to name names, but maybe if you could give us a sense of the characteristics, perhaps those leaders that have really helped to inspire you and to shape you into the leader that you are today. Who are they and what have they done for you?
I could name 50, to be honest, because I think that I just like to take little things from everyone who I watch and observe and learn from. So probably early days, the ones that had a real influence on me were my mum and dad for a start. And I think when you reflect on what I learned from them, mum was very empathetic and people first, and always the first to put her hand up for charity fundraising or something like that. My dad, he ran his own business for many years, so he had a work ethic and also a real support for his staff, and knew how to work for them. So I could see how he interacted with them and the respect that he gave them and they gave him. So there are a few things I learned from them. I learned from Mick Moldhouse, who was my first AFL coach, who the big thing that he did was he worked out what button he needed to press to get the best out of you. And there's a bit more of an older school mentality now where some people he'd put his arm around them and wouldn't sort of go off or yell at them in front of a group because he knew that was how he'd get the best out of them. But then he'd reflect on the things that were important to them. He'd learn their story and be able to bring all that together. For me, he'd go hard at me in front of everyone because he knew I'd grit my teeth and go, I'll bloody show you, and I'd go hard because I want to prove him wrong, because he knew that trying to prove people wrong had been a big part of my background to get to that point. So he knew which buttons to press and how to work with people. And then I was lucky enough to have 6 years with Craig Bellamy, who's the sort of famous coach at the Melbourne Storm. And he had an amazing work ethic. But the biggest thing I learned from him was that he never thought he knew it all. He was always learning. And bar a couple of COVID years, for the whole time he's been coaching, he would go with Frank Panisi, who's another great mentor of mine, who's the GM of the Melbourne Storm, the football GM. The two of them would go for 3 weeks in their holidays, in their own time off, and go to other clubs, other organisations, and actually learn from them, just to try and find 1 or 2% somewhere, which in elite sport, 1 or 2% is huge. So the fact that they never think they know it all, and I could tell you a million stories about Craig and my experiences coming from AFL into NRL, where I'd make suggestions thinking this could go one of two ways. He could go, mate, stay in your lane. It's got nothing to do with you. You're the AFL guy. But it was always, oh, that's interesting. That's a perspective I hadn't heard before, or he'd explain to me why they do something that way when I'd ask a question around it. So just always having that mindset of trying to learn and trying to get better is something that he's been doing forever.
I love that you've referenced that 1 to 2% a couple of times, and I love that because one of my very favorite books is called Atomic Habits by James Clear, and he talks about, when you're trying to make a shift, growing or developing in something, rather than looking at the big mountain and going, oh my gosh, I've got to climb that big thing. He just says, look at it and break it down into these, little incremental steps. And sure enough, you get there. And when you talk about that 1 to 2%, I love it because it reminds me of, making these little tweaks and just little change in direction here or there that's really got the ability and the possibility of changing things quite drastically. So where do you look for your 1 to 2%? Like on a daily basis now, leading your team and Eclat as an organisation, what are your 1 to 2% that you look for?
Yeah, it's interesting. Off the back of that, before I answer that question, is there's the Muhammad Ali quote where he said, "It's not the mountain ahead that wears you down; it's the pebble in your shoe." So, what are those little things? Because if you actually list the things that frustrate you day to day, they're the most solvable things, and that's why they frustrate us. It's not the big project; it's the little things that annoy you, like people being late for a meeting or whatever it is. It's just small. They're the frustrating things that are really solvable. I found. And probably the other element to that is around the 1 or 2%. So when I was at the Melbourne Storm, and that was probably one of the most significant experience I had from a leadership development perspective, because I'd never done it before. I never taught leadership. I didn't have a do. I think the hardest thing about leadership is there's no grand final. There's no Super Bowl. You can't win leadership. It's literally you can have the best moment or the best day of your life, and 10 minutes later you've stuffed something up royally, and you feel like you're a failure. So that's leadership. You're always on that journey. And I remember going to the Storm, and they had they had a full leadership team, but if you look at the three that everyone publicly talks about, the big three, which was Cameron Smith, Cooper Cronk, and Billy Slater, they were like the three leaders of Queensland and the three leaders of Australia and the three leaders of the Melbourne Storm. So when you talked, and I started working with 23, 24-year-olds about we're developing you, you're the emerging leaders, and we're going to develop you for when those guys go. For them, they're looking at the finished product, and they're going, well, that's completely unreachable for me. I'm never going to be them. So it was, and I think that happens a lot now, where we look at what the finished product is and don't understand that journey to get there, which again, I come back to sharing, as a leader, sharing your experiences, like what actually fast track you. When did you stuff things up and it set you back, like in either the confidence of the people you work with or your own confidence? Like there's a lot of things that you can actually reflect on and learn about your own journey. So for those guys, they were like, oh my God, how am I supposed to ever be that? I'll never be that. Whereas I went, all right, let's just start with this. And I remember early on in the first few weeks, there was, I sat down with them in a group and I said, who's showing leadership this morning? And it was only early. And they also just looked at me and I said, well, you have. And I pointed one of them out. And I said, you were having coffee this morning at a cafe that I named. And he sort of looked shocked in his chair. And I said I was behind a tram and I stopped, and this lady was walking towards the door of the cafe on a frame, and she couldn't reach the door and hold the frame to be able to get through. And I said, you leapt out of your chair, ran over the door, that 10, 12 meters, opened the door, let her through, and then came back and sit down. So mate, that's leadership. That's a 1%er right there, which we're talking about, because everyone around you saw that, the 20 odd people that are out there, and none of them went and did it. But I guarantee next time in that same situation, they're a little bit embarrassed that they weren't the ones that did it. So they're going to jump out of their seat and they're going to be the ones that do it. And there'll be 20 people that'll see them do it. And then those 20 people are going to be a little bit embarrassed that they weren't the ones that did it. So that flow-on effect comes from you doing one thing for someone else that you get nothing out of. So that's a little example of leadership. So all of a sudden, for them, they're like, oh, so it's not the big inspirational speech in the halftime of the grand final. Like that's where you'll get to, but that's not where we're starting. We're starting with these little things, just giving them little wins and little understandings and obviously learning as we go and giving feedback as we go. But they've obviously got to be open to that and have an open mind towards that. So those little 1%ers are sort of the experiences. Part of it, or a huge part of it again, is sharing your experiences, and that's where putting good people around you. I've got some great leaders here who I work with, who they teach me every day. So again, it's not thinking I know it all. It's getting their opinion. And the biggest thing for me, and this is, I hate saying this because I don't want people to ever take it the wrong way, but really generically, having worked in the AFLW and the netball with a lot of female athletes, with the male athletes, this is what I need you to do, and they just go and do it. Like, go, okay, no, go and do it. The female athletes, I go, okay, why? I go, what do you mean why? I go, oh, because like, why are we doing this? Like, they want to actually get the evidence as to how that's going to help them or how that's going to make the team better. So it helped me in that it made me have to be sure of what I was asking them to do, because I knew they'd challenge me and ask why we do it. So I had to have a reason why we were going to do it. I couldn't just say, let's go do it. Whereas with the male athletes, quite often they weren't asking why, they just go and do it. And that's, I don't know if it's sort of a broad brush, but having had those experiences, I've found a large majority of the women I've worked with have had a lot of self-doubt and less confidence, where I find men come in and they've got their chest out and they're all confident. And this is, as I said, a very broad brush, but a lot of them are a lot more confident, a lot more sure of themselves. Whereas the females, you've got to build them up a little bit more than usual. And I found, though, once you do build them up and you give them that confidence and they believe in themselves, then they just soar. Like, they're just unbelievable. And I'm lucky. I mean, the team we've only got sort of like 4 or 5 males in our team and about 15 females. And they're so good in terms of giving him that confidence and making him feel safe and building him up and telling them how good they are and showing them what they're achieving. that you start to remove that self-doubt, and then, as I said, they just start taking off, and that's something that I learn from them every day. So I'm really lucky that I work with a team full of, as I said, both males and females, but a team that I'm learning from every day. Even though I've got the title is sort of completely irrelevant, and try and give them the confidence to show that they can do anything as well.
Yeah, that humility again is coming through in that comment. And I think, that there would be some data and evidence to back it up. I mean, when we talk about the imposter syndrome, often that's attributed to more females feeling that than males. Equally, though, I've had experiences of asking, a bunch of men maybe in a program, how confident are you, or what impacts your confidence? And there's plenty of commentary that comes out too. But I really like there, as a leader, you've got to be ready to answer the questions that you might get, such as why are we, why are we deploying this particular strategy and not the other one? And I think from that, there's a sense of, rather than being questioned, which I know that a lot of leaders don't enjoy and find that quite threatening, what I'm hearing in that is that actually the question and the opportunity for a discussion brings about, an increase in learning on both sides. Is that how you see it? When you are asked, when you are asked the question, why are we doing it, or whether it's in your current role or in past roles, how have you responded to that, Nick?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that part of that is around my biggest failure as a leader happens regularly, and it's that it'll be quicker and easier if I just do it myself. And as a leader, that's the worst thing you can do, because if you think you can do it yourself, you're not showing someone else how to do it, and it becomes more and more reliant on you as the leader. And again, you want that's also, I guess, there's an arrogance and a pig-headedness to that, in that you think that you're always the best way as well. So being able to take that step back and go, almost cringe a bit, go, it's not how I would have done it, or geez, that's not going to go quite right. But then being able to reflect off the back of that, sit down and go through and go, what was your process? Well, let's go through what your process was to get to that point. I did this, and this, and what result did we get? It didn't go very well. Would you have changed the process? Oh, no. Oh, well, that's good learning then. We didn't lose money on that. We invested money in our development and our learnings. So I think taking away that pass or fail type thing, and actually go, did we learn something or didn't we learn something? And again, go back to what was the process of it? Well, if we had a bad process, let's review the process, and let's go back to that and go, what would we do differently? And probably the hardest part for me in the last 18 months is going from a startup to a real business, is that in a startup, it's all hands on deck. You've got everyone's doing everything, and being able to transition from that to more specific roles, and you own this, you own this, you own this, and being able to not be everything to everyone, and being able to focus more on, work more on the business than in the business, is something that I'm still not doing well enough, and I want to get to, and I need to get to, if we're going to be successful the way that I think and hope that we will be. But again, that's putting your trust in other people to go about it and do their job. So it's being able to guide them, being able to support the learnings, not the failures, as you go, and understand that that's just part of the process that we go through, in terms of everything can't just be like that, and it never has for anyone. If you look at every single leader, they've all gone up and down, and they have good moments and bad moments. As I said, there's no Super Bowl trophy at the end of leadership. It's something that you're going through every single day, and you got to continually learn and continually seek feedback, and continually get frustrated, because that's what it is. If it was all smooth sailing, then anyone could do it.
Yeah, that's right. I really love your reflection there on there's no premiership to be won in leadership. There's no Super Bowl trophy, I think you said. So having had such a long career in sport and now in corporate leadership, because I think it's going to be relevant to a lot of leaders listening, how do you manage and maintain your motivation when you know that, I mean, we've got half year results, end of year results for listed businesses. Obviously, you've got, your share market are giving you that scorecard review, if you like, as to the value of the business and how the public perception of that business is. But how do you keep your motivation sustained, and that of the teams, when you don't have this premiership trophy that you've potentially got at the end of the season?
Yeah, it's funny because in when I'll do leadership presentations to groups, I talk about in sport, winning is obvious. Like there's a scoreboard and you celebrate by singing the song, or you get a medal, or you get a trophy. Like it's obvious in sport, but in business it's not. So as you say, you might get to June 30 and you've hit all your marks and all that, but you've already got a higher bar for the next year set already. That's already been set. It's not, you didn't flick a switch the next day. It's already been done. So what I find in business is you don't celebrate. Celebrating is few and far between. Like you might have your Christmas party at the end, but you don't want people waiting until your Christmas party to let their hair down and celebrate. Like there's so many opportunities to celebrate all the way through. So even little things, we'll have a team lunch every time it's someone's birthday. So we're celebrating that individual and just making them feel good for half an hour. It's just a little thing, but you want to always continue to celebrate and actually take the opportunities to understand that it's not just one circle that just keeps going round and round and round. There's actually moments within that. So I speak to so many leaders and so many businesses that go, yeah, we finish a project and we've already got 2 more projects lined up after that. So it's dive straight into the next project. It's not take a breath, even to the point where you look at sport, every Monday is the whole day is a review day. So in a 7-day working week, one of those days is all reviewing. That's it. All you do is review. So one game of AFL football, it's reviewed by the senior coaches, it's reviewed by the leaders, it's reviewed by each division, the backs, the mids, and the forwards. It's every single individual reviews every single play and every decision they made in a game with their coach, and then the whole team reviews. So it's 5 reviews throughout one whole day. And then you move on, you take the lessons from that to prepare for going out and training and trying to take those lessons to improve. And then you basically have a day off, you have a little touch-up final day like a captain's run, and then you go and play. Then you have a rest day, and then you go and you review again. So it's just that continuous cycle. Whereas in business, it's obviously very different. So you will set an agenda before you go into a meeting, you go through that agenda, but you sort of move on and go, all right, let's go. Everyone's got work to do. Let's go. But you don't really sit there for 5 minutes at the end and go, okay, did we achieve what we set out to achieve in that meeting or that big project? Instead of just moving on to the next project, do we actually have a review process where we go, you know what, the key markers throughout that project, what would we have done differently? Did everyone understand their role? Did we resource it in the right way? Did we adapt, or was there any adaptation required throughout that project? Like all the different questions that you should be asking yourself in a review, because otherwise you'll go on the next one and you'll make the same mistakes again. So it's sort of, or it might even, a lot of the time, hopefully it's just reassuring yourself and your team that you did everything really well and that your process was great. So again, coming back to that and analysing, I think is really important. And at the same time, sitting around and enjoying the fact that you just finalised that project and you achieved something. So before you move on to the next one, and that could be something very, very small. I'm not saying that your staff should get together and come up with a theme song and put your arms around each other and sing it, but you can if you want. That might be your process. But,
well, why not? Why not? In
correct.
fact, we should get people to send in their songs. Neat concept, done.
Yeah.
Just off the back of that little inspo. Yeah, I really love that, because you just in you articulating it that way, there is such an intense and necessary review process, you know, for the team to then be able to get out and do it all again the next week. Yeah. How much of those learnings in sport have you been able to translate into your corporate role now, you know, in terms of corporate CEO of a very different business? How much of you have been able to translate, and what are some specific things, if they come to mind, that you've been able to deploy?
Not enough, not as many as I would like. And as I said, that's probably more, I guess, the situation we're in from going from startup to a business. So it's been a gradual process of trying to implement those things. So I don't think you can just do it, because we're trying to do something that isn't really done. There's a lot of different types of businesses where some of their elements are similar to ours, but we're doing it in a very different way. So there's things that we could just never have guessed or projected. So we've got to be able to adapt and got to be able to learn as we go. So the longer the time goes on and moving into 2024, we'll certainly have a lot more specific roles and accountability around those roles. And that's more of a sporting scene where in a team, if you don't do your job, then it has a flow-on effect to the people around you where they can't do their job to the best of their ability because they've got to pick up some of the slack for you. So bringing it to a business sense, it's that if you provide me with great social media and marketing, then it's going to allow us to get more people in the building, which is going to give me an opportunity to be able to sell to them, which is going to give us a chance to put more bums on seats in our bureaus, or get more people to our events, which means that circle sort of comes around and goes full circle. So whereas if we didn't have any marketing, then how are we getting out there? How are we getting people in here to be able to sell to them, to be able to show them what we're capable of doing? And then there's a retention element to that. So making sure that we're doing the things that we say we're going to do, and analysing that and reviewing that so that we know we're getting our members' feedback consistently, all the time, getting their feedback. And some of those things are things that we will implement straight away. Some of those things we go, you know what, that's something we need to aim to do in the next few months. Some of those things we go, look, that probably won't work for us for these reasons, but spend some time actually going through it. And I had four of the ladies in my office only this morning, and we had an idea about something, and I said, well, what do you think? And we went around the room and everyone sort of had their opinion. And I said, well, yeah, I like it. I think we should do it. Let's flip it on its head. Let's be devil's advocate. Why wouldn't this work? What would be the downfall if we did do this? Like, is there a way this could go wrong for us? Is there a way that this wouldn't work? So looking at it from multiple angles instead of just a lot of the time, particularly in new business, everyone's so invested and so desperate for us to be successful that you think of something and go, yeah, it's a good idea. Everyone starts getting excited about that idea because it's going to help us. And then you go, oh, hang on, let's just take a breath here. Let's take a step back. Let's look at it holistically and go, what if it doesn't work? Or how could it not work? And actually spend some time going through it, coming back to your process again. So then if it doesn't work, we can go back and take notes. I mean, I'm the biggest note taker of all time, and a lot of my staff are exactly the same. And the reason behind that is we're not all experts that can have photographic memories and remember everything. So being able to write it down and go back to your process and go, did I get that right? Did I not get that right, etc. And again, that's another sporting lesson for me where I'd every single meeting I'd be scribbling and writing notes and looking for 1% here or there, because it's going to make us better and make me better.
That feedback element, Nick, that you talk about, I think is a lot of leaders I speak to find that really challenging. Either asking for direct feedback, they might ask and get crickets, no one responds, or maybe it's having to hear feedback that's been pretty tough. Have you got an example that comes to mind, throughout your entire leadership career where you've had to cop a bit of feedback that was a little bit hard to hear? And what went on? Did you take it on or did you ignore it?
I think you take everything on because it all comes from different perspectives. So someone's observation is their perspective. So I think that you actually have to look back at that. Probably the hardest one I ever got was from Mick Malthouse, the guy that I mentioned, my first AFL coach. I remember we played a game over in Perth and we're playing against Fremantle. And at halftime, I was just a young player, and he just ripped shreds off me in the halftime huddle in the change rooms, and was saying you're selfish and you don't care about your teammates and you're not putting your teammates first. All the things that was the only reason I was in the team. Like that was all I was good at. I wasn't good at all the other things. So I was pretty devastated by that. And I went in on the Monday. It takes a lot of courage to do this, but went in and sat down with him and said, "Can I talk to you about what you said at half time?" He said, "Yeah, sure." And I said, "That's bullshit. You're saying that I'm selfish, I'm not a team player and all that. Like, that's all I am. So if I can't do those things, then there's no point in me actually being in the team, because that's what I'm good at. That's how I make my teammates better and help us the team." And he goes, "Yeah, I know." I was like, "Well, why'd you say it?" And he said, "You hadn't had a good first half." And he said, "How did you perform in the second half?" I said, "It doesn't matter, we got smashed." And he said, "You played really well. So I know that if I push certain buttons on you, that you're going to get aggressive and you're going to be like, I'll show you, I'll prove you wrong." So again, he knew what button to press on me. So it wasn't feedback I wanted to hear. But then when he explained it to me later, it sort of helped me go, "Oh, okay, I can see where he's coming from on that." As I said, that's going back 20 years now. So it's a different world that we live in today. But back then, that was sort of something that was pretty common. So I think as leaders, if you really, truly want to have open feedback and have people be able to give you that, then it's about the environment you create to allow that. And part of that is you can actually manufacture that very easily. And that's where you tee up someone in that you trust in your team to really challenge you on something, like deliberately say something that is wrong or that you think is wrong, and have them challenge you on it, and then go, you know what, I'm wrong. I was wrong on that. I think you're spot on, and actually put your hand up and say I was wrong. Because if you do, then it sort of gives everyone else a green light to go, because no one wants to be wrong. No one wants to fail. So, but it's a necessary evil in what you're trying to do. If you're right all the time, then you're not challenging yourself or your team enough, because you've got to fail at different stages. But as I said, that fail comes back to a learning rather than a big cross next to your name. So you can set that up. Even I remember we had a young guy when I was captain, and I saw a lot of leadership in him. I thought that he had a good future as a leader, and I waited. So the whistle would go after a drill, and everyone would come in, and everyone would have a say. And I jogged over to him and said, I'm going to ask you this question in about 2 minutes' time. So have your answer ready. So we got in there and sort of, all right, what do we think? And everyone's having a say. And I just pulled him out and said, what did you think? And he gave a really articulate, really good answer. And I was like, mate, I hadn't thought of that. That's brilliant. Perfect. Well done, mate. And then all the boys get around him and he feels good about himself for having that say. If I had have just gone straight to him without having given him a chance to think about it and be able to articulate something, he probably would have gone, oh, yeah, not quite sure, or like, and try and back out of it. But he had the confidence. And then, so that's a little moment that allowed him next time, like he could jump in and be confident that I know what I'm talking about. I know what it is, rather than just sort of hitting him up in a moment when he wasn't quite ready. So there's a lot of ways that you can set up and manufacture these little moments to be able to build confidence and leadership amongst your team.
Yeah, I think that's a good example of knowing when, you're helping the person to perform as best as they can. So some people respond really well to, hey, can I just ask you a question, and you give the response straight away. It's traditionally your extroverts, or so the theory tells us, that are happier to kind of just, let's just go and play with an idea without much notice. But then you've got those that are more reflective and that actually do benefit, even if it is a 2 or 3 minute heads up, but just an opportunity for them to gather their thoughts so they feel confident and they're not being put on the spot. So I think it's a really good example of adaptive leadership. And a little bit like what you talked about there, Mick obviously had a strategy in place for you around revving you up for second half. May not be the same these days around that, but he, as you've said throughout this conversation, he knew, and leaders often know which buttons to press in terms of getting that motivation, and really getting that person to perform as best as what you need them to in the team.
Yeah, and I think that's also now culturally, like the world's never been smaller. So we have so many people from so many different backgrounds and heritages coming and calling Australia home. So I think at times the easiest thing is to go, oh, yeah, she's pretty quiet, or, oh, yeah, he comes across as arrogant. But in reality, if we haven't spent time to actually find out more about that person's culture and who they are and how they grew up, then that might just be who they are as a person for the reasons that that is how they grew up. So we actually need to support them and understand it. And that was a massive learning for me when I first went to the Melbourne Storm, because half the list was Polynesian. So I'd never dealt with the Polynesian culture, who are magnificent people, but very family orientated. And a lot of them were sending money home from their paychecks back to their families in small villages and this type of thing. So we actually had culture nights where we'd have like a Tongan night, a Samoan night, a Kiwi night, a Fijian night. We ended up doing an Aussie night because the Kiwi boys said, mate, we don't understand half the stuff you guys talk about, your slang and all this type of thing. So, and he was spot on, is that we hadn't even taken the time to explain a lot of stuff and a lot of parts about Australian culture and actually go through that. So for me, it was brilliant to learn from them. And if you think about all the different, the brushes that we paint different cultures with, how much time have you actually spent understanding them? So we'd have guys that would get up who they wouldn't say anything in a meeting because they sort of are very quiet and reserved. They knew all the answers though. They knew them all. It's just the background they're from is they wouldn't just jump up and say or give an answer until they were asked. So we'd get them up to talk about their family and their background and where they come from, and they'd sing songs and we'd eat their food. And it was unbelievable just learning and getting this experience from people from different backgrounds. So again, in your own organisation, the different heritages that are amongst that, which have different cultural flow-on effects. Some people will be confident to get up in a meeting. Some people maybe prefer, if they have to do a presentation, to be asked a question that they can elaborate on. So think about all the little things that you can bring in to help people be more successful.
It's getting to know your people, Nick, is what I'm hearing, and that really, really understanding what drives them, but not only from a performance perspective, understanding them as a human. And I really love that. It's bringing that humanity aspect to leadership, which should always be there. Nick, I want to finish off with one question, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So when you are working now in different leadership capacities, and you've got, maybe someone who is struggling with leadership, maybe they may be an emerging leader, but not necessarily so. But it's someone who's struggling with leadership and really thinking, oh, do I really want to do this? It's taking up a lot of energy. What's some advice that you would give to them?
That's a great question, because there's so many of them that are so different. I think you don't have to have all the answers. And that's the biggest thing I find, is that as a leader, people look to you for guidance, for support, for answers. I reckon every week I'll say to my team, or someone in my team, oh, I actually don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know what the answer is here. So how do we go and find that? Well, who's the expert in this field? What do we need to learn? What should we ask other people on the team? So I think too often we feel like we have to have the answers, and we have to be the person that is always right, or gets it all, or understands it all. I put my hand up a lot and say, I'm not sure. I don't know what the answer is here. And I think that that's okay for me. I think that obviously the more experience I get and the older I get, then you'll have more ideas of certain things. But again, you'll also be way more further away from the next generation coming through, and the things that they learn, and the things that push their buttons and their motivations. So even you talked about learning from people and what their motivations are. I think that's one that we don't go to enough as leaders, and try and find out what it is you're looking to do. What do you want to do? Do you want to be, if you want to be the CEO one day, I've got to actually treat you a lot differently to if you just want to do the same job you're doing for the next 40 years, show up and do your 9 to 5 and have your holidays, and that's all you want to do, which is completely fine, as long as you do your job. And if anything changes, let me know. But if you want to be the CEO, that's not enough. We have to learn how to develop you. We've got to throw different challenges at you. We've got to find out what you're good at and what you're not, so we know we can put you in more situations that are going to challenge you to be better or to learn. So you've got to understand what those motivations are, so you can help set up a pathway for them moving forward.
Yeah, I reckon that's I love that. You don't have to have all the answers, and it reminds me that you started this conversation with some advice that that you had received at the start of that captaincy, which is, we are just expecting you to be you, is what I heard. And I think there's a lot of vulnerability in that, and also a lot of humility, which has really come through this conversation. So Nick, thank you so much. You've shared so many different pieces of advice and feedback, which I think are going to be absolutely insightful and usable for any leader, in the sporting industry or in other industries. So thank you very much for being on the Leadership Lane podcast today, Nick Maxwell. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.